I got promoted while I was on the road, working from an RV, full-time, traveling around. Definitely got a salary bump. Nobody has ever complained about my internet speeds. Hello everyone. So this is one of our most requested videos of all time. How do we get internet while we're traveling? I am working full-time. That's why you see Paige quite often as I'm off on the sidelines doing other things. So how do we make sure that we have stable internet so that both of us can work at any given time? I am a senior engineering manager for a software company. I have been in IT and electronics, and I was on the internet when the computers had to scream at each other over phone lines. Been on the internet a long, long time, and so I had very specific things that I wanted to make sure I could do. I know a lot of people rely on just like maybe a satellite internet provider, maybe just an internet hotspot. I didn't want my career to be limited by not having internet or being like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have very good cell reception this week. I didn't want that to be an excuse or excuse that my campground Wi-Fi is slow, so I can't connect to my meeting today. That was not going to be an acceptable excuse. I'm in management now. And so the main criteria was that it had to be stable. And that is, it could not rely on just one internet source. That immediately meant I was going to be more complicated than your average internet setup. And that was fine by me. My second consideration was that I wanted to pull in as much lower cost internet as I could. So cell coverage tends to be capped at certain amounts of data, and so I didn't want to be reliant on that because we still needed to upload things to YouTube. I didn't want to blow through my cap doing that, so I needed to be able to pull in basically the cheapest internet option that I had around. Another one is I wanted to be able to extend the range of things too. I didn't want to be limited on just whatever my cell phone could pull in or my hotspot, so I wanted to be able to have an exterior antenna with it as well. You're in campgrounds a lot. The nearest cell phone tower might be further than what your cell phone can pick up or what a hotspot can. Essentially, depending on the RV, you're living in a tin can. For those of you that don't know electronics, that's actually going to really limit the wireless signals that you can get into your rig. It's actually going to attenuate it quite a bit. And so I wanted something that could have an exterior antenna so that I could pull in signals from further away. Most of my day is either working with software, and so pulling a bunch of data down and up from my company's servers, and then video conferencing. That's probably half of my day is talking to people on Zoom or Skype or what have you. Most of my day is coordinating between people, so I needed to have something that is low enough latency that people aren't being like, what? What'd you say? I can't hear you. You're frozen. Didn't want to have that stereotypical Zoom experience there. So we needed more speed than, say, somebody that's just emailing or watching Netflix or something like that. I needed something that was more than that in all sense of the word. Wanted something that was at least approximating what I was getting with either cable or fiber internet back in Dallas. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get the speeds because we were getting upwards of a gigabyte per second there. I knew I was not going to get that, but I wanted something that wasn't going to be a problem. I wanted something that was going to stay out of the way so I could get my work done. So there are probably hundreds of videos on YouTube explaining exactly this kind of internet setup. Everything from very bare bones using a Wi-Fi hotspot to actually more advanced than what I even have. I actually decided not to go with the maximum amount. I almost spent way too much money on it, but I spent only a little bit too much money on it. So I believe I went through mobile must-haves, but essentially what we are using is actually professional IT equipment. If you think about companies that need to be in remote areas or remote situations, they're going to have very similar needs to RVers that are working full-time and using internet. So we're using technology called PepLink. I think they're also referred to as PepWave sometimes, but we're using specifically the Max Transit Duo, which allows me to use multiple cell phone networks at the same time. They have dozens of products that do this, and really you can select any one of those that meets your needs. I almost got one that I think it was called the BR1 Max Pro, which was like twice the price, but also did twice as much. I like ours. It's actually pretty right size. So that leads into what are we using for internet? So our main connection is either usually campground Wi-Fi or Starlink. I'm actually really excited with the satellite internet space. There seems to be some competition coming in. Hopefully that means higher speeds, lower costs, etc. We'll see what happens. There is various controversy around the satellite configurations and things like that about astronomy and low Earth orbit satellites and things like that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm an amateur astronomer. I get it. It does ruin some night viewing, but it is actually really pretty seeing that little string of pearls go across the sky too when you're viewing, even though it might mess up with whatever observations you're trying to make. Lately, especially as we go across the western United States, we found that we're mostly using Starlink, as a lot of campgrounds out here call it Wi-Fi, but they might as well not even offer it. it, to be perfectly frank. The campground we're staying at right now, I had it disconnecting so often, I actually just had to disable our Wi-Fi link completely. Otherwise, we also have an LTE. So this is unfortunately only an LTE modem. That means it does not take advantage of 5G speeds. But with LTE, it also means you have a longer range. So we're able to pick up signals that are further away. So you're not reliant on that 5G coverage. And it's usually fast enough for a video call for me. So we have 2 cell phone providers that we use, and we can switch between those. I believe this can even balance an auto split between the 2 if I really had to balance the traffic between them. So you can get really, really advanced with this. So you can actually do all sorts of cool stuff with it. With Starlink and really any satellite provider, being able to see the sky in the direction that the satellites are going to be in is the most important thing. The second most important thing is how close you are to a base station that's receiving this, but you don't have control of that. They are making better and better dishes now. We're using a version 2 dish, which means it has to point itself. They're making better and frankly more expensive units now that are a little bit more high performing and can get through maybe light tree coverage and things like that. But for most of you that might use this, you're going to be concerned about trees around the site and having to move it around. So what I've done is we have a pole setup that attaches to our ladder, and I can actually get pretty high above the RV. So if somebody has small trees or shrubs, I'm not blocked by those. We can also move it around on the ground to get around that as well. I've actually wired it up so that we have a direct connection in the back of the RV, so I'm not running cables through windows or seals or anything like that. And you can do that too. There's all sorts of how-tos on how to add cabling or change your cabling on your Starlink so that you can move it around and get the best view of the sky that you need to. Sometimes I can only get partial coverage. So, I have a tree in the way that I absolutely cannot get through. And in that case, that's where this particular device shines, because I can then add on one of our cell phone plans. So basically, now both of them are active. And then I use a trick called bonding. So Paige will generally use the primary link, whatever I have set up for kind of primary. And then for my video calls and stuff, I'll add on the extra connection, and I'll actually end up bonding both of those connections together to basically create one stable connection, and it will auto switch between them. It requires you to either use their cloud service or set up your own server so that you can then route that connection, and then basically it splits your request between the 2 channels and then recombines them at your server or their server, and then it goes out to the internet. But this creates something that can use really spotty connections to create one stable connection that you can then use. Because cell phone plans are data capped, I'll usually only activate that when I'm not working on something that's interruptible. If I'm in a conference with somebody, if I'm trying to coordinate between people and it's time urgent, that's usually when I activate that. If it's something that's interruptible, something that can resume itself, that I don't really have to worry about, I'll just kind of let it ride. If Starlink goes out for half a second, it's perfectly fine if it's on a download or an upload or something. It's usually not fine if I'm trying to talk to somebody and I freeze for 2 seconds while it tries to reconnect. Paige is generally ultimately interruptible because she's working on YouTube videos, she's uploading them, she might be chatting with contractors or something somewhere else, usually via text, so she tends to be a lot more interruptible than I am. Paige doesn't have Zoom meetings, for better or for worse. If you look down below, we'll go ahead and put some resources down there so that you can either research this for yourself or actually just go ahead and purchase a system that's very similar to this. Like I said, Mobile Must-Haves is a very good one, and there's lots of other YouTubers that have done a much more thorough how-to if you want to duplicate their setup exactly. I'm not going to do a how-to today. This is mostly just kind of covering what ours is. But if you want a how-to, comment down below and I'll do one for you. So let's talk about money. So if you count the hardware, I want to say the hardware itself ended up being around $1,500. So that counts the Peplink router, that counts the extra antenna, that counts the custom mount that I designed and made for the antenna up on the roof, that counts for the Starlink hardware, and all sorts of other dibs and dabs and routers and things that I put together to make this. It's actually made so that it can switch over to the 12-volt system in the future once we have some better batteries and things like that. But right now it's just running on AC or our power bank if we need it. Monthly cost, you're looking at Starlink, and as of right now, I believe that is $120 to $150 a month for the roaming plan. I just read some news articles. They're starting to crack down on people that are abusing certain types of plans, and that costs are going to be rising. So I guess we'll look forward to that. Like I said, hopefully there's some competition coming in that will help reduce some of those costs. So $120 just for that base. We try to use Wi-Fi in campgrounds and stuff that we can. We tend not to pay for that. Things like Tango internet and such I find not to be worth it. We have an existing cell phone provider that we have an unlimited data plan through. provider that will eventually throttle us, and so I just threw in a data-only SIM card there. So that comes along with just our cell phone plans that we have already. A lot of times you'll find that through the big cell phone providers will give that to you so you can have just a data plan. I would only use that for backup, just because I don't want my cell phone to suddenly be throttled on data. Then we also have, like I said, an LTE plan through a major provider. It's a business plan because we are running it as a business, which also means that they're not going to throttle us. Business plans come with different kinds of stipulations. They come with a bit more guarantee of certain kinds of performance and data. So that's why we decided to do that. And that runs us about another $100 a month. So if you're all in monthly, we're paying about $220 to $250 a month for the kind of internet access that I need. That sounds like a lot. Even in the US, where we tend to blow our broadband prices out of proportion, that's a lot of money. So a couple of different reasons of why this is worth it to me. One, I've already gotten a promotion at my job with this internet setup. I got promoted while I was on the road, working from an RV, full-time traveling around. Definitely got a salary bump that was more than what we're paying for our internet. So must be that my goal was achieved, because nobody has ever complained about my internet speeds. Actually, because we can multiplex our connection, I end up dropping out less than my boss, who lives in sticks and bricks. But then if you look at if I was actually working in a office, commute time, parking, like I've worked in like downtown Cleveland where I was paying for parking every single day, or a bus fare or whatever. Downtown Cleveland, it cost me $300 a month just to park downtown Cleveland. It was already $300 a month. And then you look at wear and tear in your car, or you look at bus fare, or you look at just even the time loss. I mean, I would spend an hour or 2 hours a day in traffic commuting back and forth from different places. I wasn't even that far away from it. It was a 15-minute drive without traffic, and all of a sudden it'd take me an hour to get home if you want to finance it across the year or something. So what, we're looking at, let's say it was about $1,200 to make my math easy. So it's $100 a month for the hardware, plus let's say $250. So you're looking at $350 a month over the course of a year to basically create and finance a system like this. That's basically parking in a major metro. It is pricey, but I completely believe it is worth it. So we're gonna bring you up and take a look at the actual setup, and I think we have B-roll of it. We'll show you me creating the little board you're about to see. We'll show you kind of the setup I have for the actual internet. So let's come up here. So this is our bag of gaming consoles that I actually use to prop the door open a little bit.
Nice fabric bin from Target.
Yeah, we actually really like these because they tend to flex and stuff around in the cupboards. So this is the board up here that I had created. And if you want, I can even bring the light up so we can be well lit.
That'd be great, Justin. Give us some mood lighting.
Mood lighting. All right.
It's romantic. All right.
Here we go.
All right.
So this is everything that's kind of been worked. So everything runs off a 12-volt power supply, because I got tired of the wall warts. Goes up to some bus bars. We have some power regulations down to, so this is actually a regulator to bring it up to 48 volts, because that's what Starlink needs. I actually got rid of the Starlink router because I hated it. I didn't like the way I just didn't like the router. I didn't like its lack of connections. I didn't like kind of how it was designed and made. It was big. Just didn't like it, so got rid of it. This is a very common mod that people do, especially people living in vans and RVs and stuff. We basically do what's called power over Ethernet injection, which is what this is. So this is actually our cable going out to Starlink, and it goes into the wall and goes out into the back of the RV. But it basically injects the power, and then back on the other side here is where the internet then comes in. So this is a better router, a Wi-Fi 6 router that I got to replace the Starlink one. So if we want to just connect to Starlink, that's our router there. This actually used to be a much shorter cable until the one I had failed. So this then connects to you can see our PepLink here, and that is the PepLink Duo. This is the connection up to the antennas up top. So you can see we have two different cell phone connections, and then we also have a Wi-Fi. So that's what allows us to bring in Wi-Fi from the campgrounds as well. And then that goes out to, we actually have a connection over to our NAS over here. So this is our network storage for probably the video that you're watching. We'll go on there, yeah. Mm. So that's 16 terabyte SSD NAS. So didn't include that in the cost because that's too much.
Multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose. And then I have some other stuff in here. So here we have a 5-volt regulator as well, because that then drives like our Google TV and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the basic setup there. Like I said, if I wanted to run this on 12 volts, I would just get rid of, basically disconnect this particular supply and then run 12 volts up to the buses up there. That's why I designed it that way.
Nice. Cool.
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it.
Is there anything else you want to know?
So one last thing, I guess, is there anything you'd like to upgrade in the future or anything? Or do you have any thoughts on that, or are you pretty happy with
Yeah,
that?
so there's a couple of things, especially if money was no object. So Starlink and other companies are coming up with new antennas every day, but they are more expensive. They're making ones that can just mount flat on top of your RV and actually then directionally shape their radio transmissions. Those are, I think the last time I checked was about $1,500 for one of those. But then there's no setup and teardown of your dish, and they're also supposed to be higher performing. I would love to upgrade the batteries in the rig so that I can have this whole thing just running on batteries. And we can even have, so if you combined that with the flat Starlink on the roof, you could have Starlink and internet just while you're going down the road on the 12 volt.
But overall, what kind of quick review would you give our current setup?
Current setup, I would consider this more advanced than most. This is something that is easy for us to set up. Takes me about 5 minutes to set up the Starlink when we get to a campground and configure the system for everything. And then I don't have to worry about it generally.
So as like a quickie review, like, do you like it?
I love this setup, actually.
That's kind of what I want to
so just the quickie review, 4.5 stars, 4.5 out of 5 stars for this. So you're looking at a 9 out of 10, just because there are some enhancements I can make in the future. But I'm actually going to replicate something like this when and if I go back to a sticks and bricks.
Oh, you like it so much?
I like this kind of setup so much. I would have outages when I was living in an apartment and I couldn't work. And that include, like, I can't really have that be a stopper. Yeah, I can't really.
Oops, yeah, you're good. You're good.
I can't really have that be a stopper for what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm actually going to replicate this kind of setup. It's probably not going to be exactly this, but it will be something like this where it actually takes advantage of cellular connections. It'll take advantage of whatever terrestrial internet that we have, etc. So yeah.
So you love this setup.
I do love this setup.
And the setup, by doing this setup, it's taught you a lot about how you want to do.
Yeah, so this has taught me a lot about how I actually want to do internet in my house. I'm sure there's, if there are IT professionals out here, you've probably made things like this. Like I was saying, businesses make things like this so that you can operate without losing your connection. You can operate in remote areas and things like that. But yeah, they actually make server mount hardware that does exactly this, or uses like 12 SIM cards to bond together for like a high-speed internet for a remote location. Well, everyone, I hope that satisfies your curiosity, or it might whet your curiosity to know more. So if you do want to know something more about what this is, or more about what I'm doing, leave some comments down below and we'll try to do that. Otherwise, great talking to you, and we'll see you again next week.